Hi, and thanks for joining me today. I'm Ellie Cassidy, and today we're going to have a chat about all the equipment you might need when you start up as a newborn photographer. It's one of those things when you become a photographer, initially you think, I just need my camera and then I can kind of get going. Then you look into the business and you realize that with newborn photography, it comes with bean bags and props and blankets and outfits and baby shushers and lighting, and the list grows and grows and grows. And it can be quite overwhelming. And having trained so many photographers over the last 10 years, what I've learned is that often we buy the wrong things at the start and end up selling them on and changing our minds later on as to what we actually need. So what I wanted to do was show you, just show you around my studio, some of the different things that I use, some of the different options that you have, because it's not a one fit for everybody. What works for one of you might not work for somebody else. So it's finding the right thing that feels right, that works with your system, your setting, the camera and lighting you're going to be using. So hopefully it will just give you a good kickstart as to not spending the wrong place and just make some good sound investments. Here's my posing station. It's based on an IKEA Kallax system with that a joiner fitted a table to the top of for me to give me a larger working area. What I really like about it is, as well as having a very large space to work on, which is great if you ever have twins or triplets in the building, it also means I can work either stood up or sat on a hairdresser stool. Just which protects your back, because after years of working at a beanbag, it can really damage your back. One advantage of this system as well is it gives me storage space underneath, so it doubles up. So under here I have easy access to all my different furs and wraps and accessories. Alongside my posing table, I really like my IKEA trolley. There's loads of different company kitchen trolleys available, but it lets me have everything neat and tidy, and I can stack all my camera gear on the top shelf. I have my posing pads and things on the middle shelf, and all the baby paraphernalia, so wipes and sanitizers and muslin cloths on the lowest. Now with both the table and the beanbag, baby will be at a height. So I know some people are put off about using a table height because they'll say, well, baby's much higher. But a baby could hurt themselves whatever they fall off. Ultimately, as a photographer, it's our job to make sure the baby's safe and always be within arm's reach. So as long as they're never left alone, I don't see an issue with the slight raise in height because you're always there. In the same way as you'd always be there at a baby changing unit, say, or a nappy station. If you have a little look under here, I can show you how my table is set up. So on top of the table, I've bought a piece of foam, and it's furniture cushion. It's actually the cushion seat for an outdoor cushion garden. And then what I've done as well is, because over the years, with lots of the poses, we wanted this kind of curved position of baby where their heads like this and their bottoms are up. So we're kind of creating this shape with them. You can either pad underneath the flat surface to raise them up, or you can put them in something that's like by putting it into my foam. But all that does is it just helps create that starting shape. It sinks baby into it a little bit, gives them a bit of a lift to help create the curves that we're usually looking for. Now, if you like the idea of the foam, but you haven't got a studio space yet, or you've got too small a space to leave a permanent setup there, the other option is you can actually take the foam and use it independently on its own. So you can either use it on the floor and set up, clamp the backdrop to some boxes or a low backdrop stand you could take with you. Or the other thing I found, which I've done myself, is sometimes when you go to clients' houses, if they're a bit small on space, virtually everybody has a dining table. So I've used their dining table and I've clamped my backdrop to the back of their chairs. So it's worth a shot. It's a really cheap investment to make to see if you like it or not. I think it's about £20 for the foam, give or take a little bit, depending where you get it from. But I just found also it's so lightweight, it's so much smaller in a car to pack away than a large beanbag is. So it's just something I think that's worth exploring, and you might find it works really well for you. So with regards to the posing pads, although I work with mainly a dip as we've shown in my foam, there's so many different options of different beans and paddings and stuffings out there. So I thought I'd just show you a few examples. So one that you'll see all over the place is a posing bean, we tend to call them, a bit of a kidney bean shape. They do come in different finishes. I've got a soft fleecy one because actually once it's down, it doesn't move very much and it's really washable. However, you can get really nice velvet ones, or you can get fake leather or even leather ones. Anything that's the priority is for it to be washable though. And the other tip with these is often when you get them, they're full of polystyrene, which can be really noisy and crunchy under baby's head. So I've swapped all mine out and filled them with teddy bear filling. It just means that if baby's asleep and I'm sliding it underneath them or moving it around at all, it's not making that kind of crunchy noise to wake them up. So another option that I was very much a go-to initially, cheaper and cheerfuler, especially if you're new and starting out and trying to decide, if it's for you or not before you invest too much more. There's absolutely nothing wrong with using folded up muslin cloths to build up your different layers, and you can shape them so you can have them in squares, you can have them in rectangles, and often a stack of those will lift up feet and heads. And the nice thing as well is because they're not a set shape, they're a lot more malleable, so you can kind of open them out, bend them, squinch them to get them into the right place. So cheapest shapes, and you can't go wrong with. Another example of pads that I do use are rounded ones, and these I actually use in the props underneath baby's head, just to raise their head a bit higher, so that when I'm shooting alongside from floor level, their heads are raised and clear of the bowl, and it just gives them a nice soft cushioning underneath their heads as well. But this is one of the tips that I use virtually every session I have. You know, the green foam we talked about? This is just an offcut of it. And I know it doesn't look much, but it's always hidden under a blanket. But it's literally just a small wedge of foam, which I've cut into kind of a cheese shape, but with slightly rounded corners. And it allows me just to slide it in and gives me the nice shape to raise baby's head or feet. Okay, another thing that I would not want to be without in my studio is white noise. Just any kind of noise in the background that can drown out the chatter and the moving around of equipment, conversations with parents. If somebody drops something, having a white noise helps the baby to tune all of that out. And also it can mimic the sounds in the womb. So they're used to being inside a very noisy womb and hearing blood rushing and various noises, mum's heartbeat as well. So a white noise app can really help to settle your baby. So this is one I use all the time. It literally just does like this. And it will do it for 15 minutes or for half an hour. Now, you can get loads of free apps for your phone that will do exactly the same. But my concern is, well, twofold. One, I think often having your phone next to the baby, it just doesn't look very professional. And then you do get some parents who are a bit nervous about technology and phones and waves and things near their babies too. But also, if you've got your white noise app on and you've just got baby to sleep, and then you get a text or a phone call that either you need to answer or that's not on silent and disturbs the white noise sound, then you've undone everything you've just done. So I think for me, an investment of a baby shusher of some sort is definitely the way forward. I think it just does look more professional. As well as the branded baby shusher, which is on Amazon and various other places. I know that a few supermarkets do their own version, and also I've heard really good things about the You and the Sheep, which is like a soft toy Ewan that also makes a heartbeat noise as well. So there's lots and lots of options for you to try. But I would say having something that's marketed as a baby white noise is good, because you know it's going to be decibel protected and not damage any ears, and it just looks the part as well. But I would not want to do a session without one, so white noise should be quite high on your list. Okay, and going in hand with that, something else that you can experiment with as well is Lullavibe or vibrating rocket. There's lots of different examples, but literally it's just a little vibrating pad. You can probably hear it. It adds to the white noise as well. And I can just slide that underneath the blanket on top of my foam, and it just helps kind of give baby that feeling of not being abandoned, that the vibration helps settle them. It makes them feel a bit like they're being held still. You'll probably know, if any of you have got children or have friends with children, you'll know how quickly they always say they fall asleep in the car. It's that same thing. It just mimics a bit of movement, and that kind of little vibration helps them feel settled. So that's something else that I would look at investing in. And again, they're not expensive at all, just nice, cheap and cheerful, but does the job. I always recommend having a fan heater near your baby. As well as keeping them warm, it's actually the warm breeze that helps them to settle as well. And just remember that anytime you've got the baby in clothing or wrapped or swaddled, you need to just turn that heat source either off or away from them for a little bit. But while we're talking of heat as well, another tip for you that I would have on your essentials list is hot water bottle. Really, really simple, traditional, nothing fancy about my hot water bottle. In fact, I've got a light one because I can use it to be cheating and check my white balance and my exposure with it too. But when you're carrying a baby and they're warm in your arms and you're settling them, all the parents are, so have them going from your warm body to a cold prop or cold area is going to disturb them much, much more. So what I do is I have a hot water bottle down on my blanket area or in my prop, and then as I place the baby down, I just switch it out. So they're lying from a warm body into a really nice warm surface, and it makes that transition much, much smoother. I have tried using the microwavable heat packs, you know, the kind of the wheat and rice ones. They work absolutely fine, but I found they just don't hold their heat as long as a hot water bottle does. Other people have experimented with electric blankets, some good successes there, but I just think a hot water bottle is cheap, cheerful and easy and safe because you're moving it as you then put the baby down there. So that's another one that I would recommend you do put on your list of essentials that you need. With blankets, we generally use a lot of stretch jersey. It's crease free when you pull it taut, and it's got no pattern. It's just really soft and easy fabric to use, and it washes and dries really quickly. But also don't dismiss looking around for different textured blankets. They can add a very different look to your gallery and style, just giving a bit more depth to your images as well. For beginners, you can't go wrong with a good stretch wrap. Anything that's got a 2 or 4-way stretch will make it much easier if you learn to wrap and swaddle babies in. Wraps like the cheesecloths and the silks are generally better as an outer layer, as second wrap over the base wrap, or as a kind of more decorative wrap. So again, the more textures you can introduce and the more styles, the richer look it can give to your image. Generally, I recommend not spending too much on your props when you get starting. But one thing that I would talk about is just be aware of the different qualities of the fabrics that you're using and how well they photograph. So these wool outfits, for example, one is like a really soft merino style wool, and the other one is a much cheaper generic wool. And it doesn't feel as nice, but also when you photograph it, it doesn't photograph as well either. So it's one of those things that I'd probably recommend investing in a few decent key pieces rather than buying lots and lots of cheaper pieces, because it will reflect in the kind of the style and quality of the work you're able to produce with that too. And finally, don't forget, if you haven't seen these before, you've probably all heard of Spanx. Well, they do baby Spanx, and it just helps to keep a baby in a nappy so you're not going to damage your wool items, but it squishes that white nappy right down, giving the baby a nicer shape, and it kind of hides all the white. You can get these nappy covers in a huge variety of colours, but they're just a nice little addition to have to make life easier for you. When it comes to your larger backdrops for like parent shots or prop shots, again, we've got several different options. You've got paper rolls, canvases and muslins, which can still come on a roll on your backdrop system. We've got vinyl backdrops, and we've also got the new Pro Fabric backdrops as well. So there's different advantages and disadvantages to each of them. Paper is cheap and cheerful, but I found it's a nightmare to use because it creases, it gets lots of dings in it, depending on how you store it. If the humidity of your studio changes, you get all these little wrinkles in it when you roll it out. So I've actually given up on paper and completely moved away towards more of the Pro Fabrics now. I have a lovely black canvas that I use for my maternity shoots. And the canvases and muslins are great, but they're very heavy and a big investment. So they're not as easy to interchange. If you've only got a small space, you only hang 2 or 3, they're not easy to swap in and out. I've used lots of vinyls over the year. Now, the problem you have with some vinyls is they can be quite reflective. So you've really got to feather your light right not to get a shiny backdrop behind you. But the advantage of a vinyl is they're usually really easy to wipe clean. So if you get baby pee and poo, or maybe you do cake smashes on them, you can just wash them down and they're good to go again. More recently, though, I've been moving towards all the Pro Fabric backdrops, which I'll show you, and they don't have a reflection to them. So they're very lightweight. They look a bit more like a canvas or a muslin hand-painted backdrop, but they're really thin, so they're very lightweight to carry and move around. You can fit them in a car, but there's also a whole range we brought out. I've designed some with click props where they've got, we call them geo flats. So you've got different shooting zones on the one drop, so it makes them kind of multi-use. Now these ones I particularly like because if you've not got a big space, you can, and you're trying to be more time efficient in your newborn shoots, you can set them up so baby's on one drop, and then you just slide the prop and the baby over to the other side, and maybe add a different outer wrap or some accessories with flowers or some kind of proppage to it, and it gives you a very different look to the second one. And I have found if you're working in a small space like a client's living room, you can actually fold these drops in half. So you've just got one side showing, and then you can flip it over if you're tighter on space. So with one backdrop, you're still getting 2 very different looks. With props, you only need a few key pieces. It can be really tempting to go overboard and buy every different thing out there, but try and master a few simple ones first, and then you can decide on what style you want to move in and what direction you like the most. So for beginner photographers, generally the trench bowls and crates where you can have a swaddled baby lying on their side or on their back are the easiest starting point, or a bucket you could swaddle them in, shoot overhead with. It's a bit harder to pose a baby in the head on hands facing forward one. So learn the basics first with a simple prop. And then once you've got more baby handling skills underway, then you can develop and progress further on. Do you remember the foam that we cut out earlier for our table? I use the frame inside my prop and it just sits in there like that at an angle. Can you see? So baby's head is here, body's on the thing, covered in my fur before I put the baby down. And that's a really nice way of supporting them when they're lying on their back upwards. And another little tip for you is here is radiator piping, but this works really well to put on the edge of your prop when you're doing any forward facing shots, this one. So babies like that, and their arms are actually rested on top of here, again, covered in a fur or a blanket, so it's all hidden out of sight. So it's just some nice, easy padding options for you. You can also, if you prefer, these do look a little bit more the part, you can buy posing aids for all your sitting props, which sit on the edge and tuck in. So baby's got a nice little bit to support them here on. So lots of different options, but again, if you need to start simple, start with the very, very cheap foams, and then when you've got the money, reinvest it in something that looks a little bit more formal and more professional if that's the way you want to go. Equally, nobody's ever judged me that I know of for having my little bit of foam, because usually it's always covered under blankets and layers anyway, so you can set it up before the parents get there. They don't need to see what's underneath it. Okay, and one last thing to show you while we're talking about props is the stuffers. Similar to all the other kind of fabrics and textiles we've looked at, you've got so many options available to you. So I just wanted to show you two things. My absolute favorite furs and curls are from Quichiku. They do all sorts of colors, textures. You can just see it is as soft and luscious as it looks on camera. They're ever so nice. The downside with these is they are hard to clean. You have to hand wash them all, and they're quite heavy and dense, so take a while to dry. But I absolutely love them. Also, you do have to, they are an investment. They're not cheap. They're quite expensive, but they photograph beautifully. So it's maybe not one you want to get loads of to start with, but it might be something to have one or two of on your wish list for when you've kind of made some more profit from your business. Another one I use an awful lot is a fur, and it's just a lovely soft fur. Now this one was actually a cushion cover. Came with a cushion, £2.99 I think, include for two with cushions. I think they were from Matalan. Again, this one will be about 11 years old. And the beauty of this one is it can go in the washing machine and in the tumble dryer, and it comes out just fine again. So different options. You've got premium and you've got cheap, and there's a place for both. Buy what you can afford to start with, and then reinvest once you've made profit and you've got money to spend. But don't feel you've got to go and buy only ever high-end stuff, because actually some of the cheaper fabrics you find might work really, really well for you. Now, when it comes to lighting, there's so many options for newborn photography. Most of us tend to start, if we've moved into the genre from scratch, a lot of us will start off trying to be a natural light photographer. And while you can make it work, it's not the easiest in the UK. We have lots of overcast, dark days, grey October or January mornings where you've got to somehow magically make the light work for you. I also think it's harder to batch edit if you're doing it in natural light, because as the light moves in and out, your exposure will change on every picture and your white balance. So taking control of the light isn't something to be scared of, and actually it's a lot easier than you think. And when we do teach training, when I teach photographers, the light we usually tend to start with is the Elinchron D-Light 1. You might have heard this bantered about, but this is a light. It's a lovely small light. It's really small in size. So nice and easy to take. It's compact. So if you're a mobile photographer or have a small studio, home studio or commercial, it'll fit in nice and easily for you. It's the lower entry light, but actually that works in our favor because the light power itself, the main bulb here that flashes, stays really nice and low power, which gives us that lovely soft window looking light almost. So that's a really handy one to use. If you've never used flash before, this bit here is the modeling light. It looks like your house light. It's slightly different, but this glows slightly orange, and that aids us in seeing where the light is falling on our baby. And then as you press your camera trigger, the main flashlight will fire to freeze the action. But it's a great starting light, and this I would usually always use in a larger softbox. So between probably 1 meter to a 135 octabox is what I'd recommend. And it'll help diffuse that light, which means it softens it as it goes through all the layers of the fabric. So by the time it reaches your baby, you've got really nice soft shadows, and the transition from hard to light is really nice and gradual. Another option to consider though, if you're not feeling confident with flash, or you'd prefer to be able to see exactly what you're getting as you're lighting, is you can get lots of LED panels. So this is one of the LED panels I have and I use in the studio, and it gives you a really nice, again, a lovely soft light coming from here. Okay, and you can color control it as well. So you can change the color balance. I don't know how well that's up on this camera. You can make it cool to warm now. You can see the difference. It goes blue to red as well. So this camera and this light, sorry, what I really like with it is lots of us have moved to mirrorless cameras. And that is very much what you see is what you get camera. So when you're looking through your camera and you're using an LED light or a continuous light, exactly what you see in screen is what you will get. There's no guesswork with the flash and making sure it's going to land in the right places. You can fine tune it exactly in the camera as you're shooting. The other advantage with an LED light is you can use it for video work as well. So if you're going between stills and adding in a little bit of video work into each session, you can just switch your camera over into modes without having to change your lighting. You can't do that with the D-Light 1 because that kind of modeling light just gives you a flicker and it's very low powered and the color balance isn't quite right either. However, one more light just to throw into the mix for you is the new Elinchrom light. Now, if you've got a bit more of a budget, than the D-Light 1. This is a similar price point as the LED panel I've shown you. This is the new Elinchrom ELC 500s. It's a TTL light. But what I loved about this light is it's modeling light. Can you see we don't have the big bulb? Instead, we've got a really bright LED light on here. So that means that I can use that very inner light as a video light, as well as using it as a regular flashlight. So it's another option for incorporating videos and stills if you want to do that. If you were to do other things than newborn photography, it's also considering a more powerful light, worth considering a more powerful light. This kind of light would work well for dance photography, for freezing motion and water and stuff like that. The D-Light 1 it's not as powerful, so you won't be able to get as crisp motion stops on those. For newborns, your light really doesn't need to be complicated. One light, and then we just gently feather it across. And by feathered, we use the edge of the softbox, that's what we call it, to reach the baby. It's ever so easy. But I do think you need to not be afraid of it and try it. And the D-Light 1 is your great entry starting light to see how you go from there. But I think you'll find as well, it can make your editing so much quicker and more consistent that it saves you so much time and money in the long run, having a good lighting system. Okay, so people always ask me what camera they should get, and that's like asking someone what car they should buy. There's a huge variety at all different scales of your budget, whether you've got a smaller budget, a larger budget, whether you're just using it for this particular purpose, or if you want to do videography alongside, what equipment you may or may not already have, because lenses are compatible with certain bodies. It's as long as you've got a good quality camera. If you've got the budget, I would try and find one with a slot for 2 memory cards. So it's a good backup system. So if ever one goes down, you've got a second card that's recorded all your session on it. But it's actually the quality of the lenses that's probably more important than the quality of your camera body. And if you can afford to buy a good starting lens now, as you upgrade your body, you can keep the same lens and just enhance the body over time when you've made enough money to do so. Lots of people talk about the ultimate camera being a full frame camera. I know when I started, we all went from kind of smaller cameras and then a full frame meant we'd kind of arrived. But the camera world has splintered off in so many different directions. So a full frame camera is still a great camera to aspire to, but also I've chosen to sell my full frames and go for a mirrorless camera because you can see how small and lightweight it is, and I can hold it with one hand while I've got the other hand soothing a baby or calming them. As long as you've got a camera strap on, you can hold them up over your baby or whatever you're shooting on. And most cameras now, lots of cameras, whether mirrorless or full frame, come with some sort of a tilt screen or an LCD. That's really handy because it means I can be shooting overhead and seeing what I'm getting. Or again, I can be on the floor and I don't have to lie on the floor anymore. I can sit down, lower the camera and look down on the screen to see what it's getting. So they're things to bear in mind. But I use the Fujifilm camera. If anyone wants more info on those, just drop me a message or chat after, because I'm an ambassador for them because I love them. I've bought into the system about 7 or 8 years ago and haven't ever looked. But when it comes to your lens choice, there's a couple of constraints when working with a newborn, and that's primarily lots of newborn photographers, we work on our own. So if you're working on your own, you need to make sure that when you're photographing the baby, you're always within no more than an arm's reach from them. If that baby moves and wiggles, you need to be there and be able to put 2 hands on them straight away and keep them safe. So that means that lens choices, we need to use a lens that's fairly wide in order to fit the whole of the scene in front of us in. You couldn't use a telephoto lens because you'd have to back up really, really far away to make sure you fit all the baby in. But if you go to too wide a lens. Have you ever seen the pictures of babies where they just look a bit distorted? They can have a really big alien kind of shaped head and a tiny, tiny body. Or you might see a close-up of a person, maybe a mum holding a baby, and something doesn't look quite right. And it's because the wide angle is an exaggerated mum's nose and cheeks, and it's made the body look very kind of skinny with a large head. Some photographers like kind of a slightly exaggerated look, and if that's you, then fine. But just be cautious as to what you use. Generally for a newborn, I would say if you were a full frame camera, a 35 to 50mm prime lens that's either a 35 or 50mm would be perfect for you. If you're on a crop sensor like I am, that's a 23 to a 35. So I actually shoot with a 35 1.4. It gives a very similar field of vision as to the human eye. So it's kind of what we're used to seeing. But it means as well that I can, all the time, I can just be within arm's length of the baby. And when I'm doing any prop shots where I might be further back or standing over them, I have a parent or spotter right next to the baby so that I can then move further away. If you've got a full-time assistant, then your options are open further. And generally speaking, the longer the lens, so more like an 85 length or a 110, gives you a lovely soft compression and it separates the baby from the backdrop. So it looks really nice with a long lens. But generally, if you're mainly working on your own, we need a slightly wider lens. So again, I wouldn't go wider than a 35mm on a full frame or 23mm on a crop sensor. That's kind of the widest I would go. And then up to your 50mm or 35mm on a crop sensor, which would give you a really nice field of vision, fit all the baby in it. And they'll be quite small, lightweight prime lenses as well. With a prime, generally speaking, the lower the aperture number, that value that might be like 1.2, 1.4 or 2.8, the lower the number, the more expensive the glass is, but the better quality the lens is. So if you can, it's good to invest in the lens over the camera and then upgrade the camera in time. The other option to consider as well is a zoom lens. And I do use a zoom lens quite a bit in my sessions. It's currently on my camera that's recording me, so I can't show it you, but I use a 16 to 55mm on a crop sensor, which is a 28 to 70 on a full frame. And that allows you to still keep nice and close. It's within that distance, working distance for newborns, but it also means when I'm doing my parent shots or prop shots where mum and dad are with baby and I can back away, I can zoom in and use the long lens, which lets the parents fill the frame more and give a nice compression between them and the backdrop. When it comes to actual camera settings on the camera itself, your shutter speed, if you're using a flash, will be limited by the flash sync speed, which is usually somewhere between 150 200. It's 160 on my camera, but around that. You always want to be in the studio on the lower ISO that you can to give a really crisp, clean, sharp file. So the only thing then we can control is our light power and the aperture that we shoot at. And aperture is how much depth of field or not we have within our. I found at 2.8, I can get all of babies from their nose, so their shoulder blades in focus, and then the body gradually fades out. If I shoot at 1.2, for example, often I'll get like half an eyelash in focus, and then the rest of the face is losing its focus. So there's times when you maybe are doing a macro shot, that might be something you're aiming for, but generally we like to see the whole face of baby nice and sharp and in focus. So usually around 2.8, which on a full frame camera is about f4. That would be kind of the remits I would normally try and recommend shooting. And it also means you'll miss less shots, because if you're shooting very wide, you have a very shallow depth of field, the area that's in focus. And when we're photographing babies, although they're still, they kind of move up and down like this as they're breathing. So shooting a little bit higher on your aperture gives you a bit more leeway. If baby wiggles or moves in and out, or you're moving in and out, that you'll still get them all nice and in focus. Thank you for joining me today. I hope that's given you some insight into the basics of things you might need, and hopefully saves you overspending on things that you don't need as well. I'm going to hang around now for the live chat, so you're welcome to come along and join me on that. Otherwise, if you're watching this on replay or you've got any other questions, you can find me at elliecassidy.co.uk or Ellie Cassidy Portraits on Instagram and Facebook. It'd be lovely to network and hear how business is going for you. I hope it all goes well. Thank you very much. Hello, thanks for joining me. It's been lovely to see all the questions popping in as we've been chatting. So I'm going to have a look at the questions and go through those and answer them now. If you've got a question you're thinking of and you haven't yet put it in, there's plenty of time still to go add it in that chat box, and I'll get through as many of them as I can. So let's have a look at our first one. We have Damien. Hi, Damien. What's the basic backdrop yet? What's the basic equipment you use, such as props? I think we've covered a fair bit of that in the video. I know you asked that nearer the start of the video, but as a quick recap, for those of you starting out now, I would say the basic stuff you need is 2 to 3 blankets for your blanket area, whether you're working on a beanbag or foam. But I think you want a few to give you a bit of variety, but also babies can make a mess. So having a couple of spares means if they have a massive punami explosion, you can switch it out and start with a fresh one. I'd then go for 1 or 2 props as well. Just start with one even initially to get you going. And I would always recommend something that you can lay the baby in. So like a trench bowl or a crate rather than an upright prop like a bucket to get you going. Once you build your confidence up, then you can add in a few more props and a few different kind of props as you go. But a lying down prop is a really easy starter. So a couple of blankets, 1 prop, maybe 2. And then the other thing that's really helpful is just a few different accessories and wraps and furs. Because even if to start with, you're using the same key backdrop pieces and the same props, having different colour stuffers and fillers and wraps will give your work a different look from each baby. So that's what I'd get started with, yeah. Let's have a look. Maria says, I love the idea of the foam. Fantastic. Have you ever done a video showing how you cut it, or can you recommend a guideline for cutting? Hate using a beanbag. I never liked my beanbag either. I used it for years and just never got on with it. I ended up making it so hard by filling it with towels and over padding it that it felt like a solid little table anyway. So the foam was a great swap. What I'd suggest for the foam is don't stress too much on the exact diameter of it. It's really not massively important. As long as you've got a bit of a well for the baby to sit in. I've got 2 or 3 foams on the go that I use in different locations, and they're all ever so slightly different, but they all do the same job. I literally got a dinner plate, drew around a dinner plate, and then I carved it with just a kitchen carving knife, nothing technical. But I went in at an angle of about 45 degrees as I went round. So it's sloping into the middle and nice and raised towards the edge. Mine looks really, really messy. It's a rough cut. It's like a proper hack kind of job. But it's always set up in advance. Or if you were to carry it into somebody's house, you carry it with your blanket on top of it. So they never need to see the state of it underneath. It doesn't have to, they're not going to judge you on the professionalism, that's the word, I can't get it out today of it, because you're always going to have a blanket and have it nicely covered there. So literally dinner plate, roughly, I don't know, probably about 12 inches. I kind of just worked on the assumption of when we put babies in props, we do the wrist to elbow measurement, and a dinner plate is a very similar shape and it was round, so it wasn't overly technical, but give it a shot and let me know how you get on. What else have we got? Nadia, being pregnant and a photographer, what kind of recommendations would you give post-birth to take photos of your newborn? I think if I'm reading this right, you're pregnant, so first of all, congratulations. And if you're taking pictures of your own child, what I'm going to say there is it comes with, try it by all means, but I would always get a friend, colleague, or pay another professional in to do it. Photographing your own newborns is so much harder than photographing a client's. And it doesn't mean you can't do it, but I would always have a backup plan of someone to help you because many reasons. One, you might be tired, depending on how your delivery goes. You might be sore, you might not be as mobile as you want to be. But also, you will smell of food and milk to that baby. So when you're trying to settle them, when you're trying to pose them, especially if you might be breastfeeding them, but even if you're not, they'll still link you with food. You tend to find that they'll wake up a bit more and maybe not go as deep asleep. So for the same reasons in the studio, once baby's had a feed, I actually take them away from the parents, bring them to me, and I do the settling and the calming because they're more likely to root for food if they're near mum. And I actually try and keep, especially if it's a nursing mum, I try and keep her away from the baby until I'm ready for baby to have a feed again, unless baby really needs one. So you can do it, but plan something really simple. Plan it at a time when you are calm and not stressed and hopefully not too tired, and pull in some help. That's my recommendations for that one. I'm hoping if I've got you, I'm hoping I've interpreted your question right. If I haven't, let me know. Irene asks, what was the exact LED panel you used? It was a Nangguang panel. They've got loads of different models of them. I couldn't tell you the exact serial number because I'm looking up because I'm looking at it. It's my video light at the moment, but it's they've got a whole range there. I'm trying to look at the height of this one. It's about 75 centimeters at its longest point, I think, but the bigger
the more expensive or the bigger size light you can afford, the more of a spread of soft light it's going to give you. There's loads of different makes out there, but the Nangguang just works really well. And what I like the most with it is that control of color balance, warm to light. So you can warm the baby image up a bit if you want to. If baby's a bit jaundiced or a bit over pink, you can kind of fix it with your lighting rather than just having to do it in post afterwards as well. So I quite like the full control that I had with that. And because it's got that by colour, it also lets you mix it up with either any natural light coming in or any light, ambient light you've got in the room from artificial lights. You can get it to kind of complement. So you're not going to get weird colour casts when you're editing afterwards. Let me just refresh and see. Some thank yous coming in. Okay, hang on. Whoa, loads have just pinged on, so bear with me. I'm going to get through these as quick as I can in my 3 minutes. So I mentioned settings at F4, but missed what the other setting guide was. F4 is really just my go-to, which is actually 2.8 on a full frame. No, so F4 on a full frame, 2.8 on a crop sensor. They'll give you an equivalent, and that lets you get all of baby's face in photo, but the body will nicely gradually fade off at the end. Any retouching on baby pictures? Yes, but a polish. You should be getting it as right in camera as you can. So don't rely on heavy editing after. It should literally be a quick tidy and polish of any kind of uneven skin, blotchy skin. So I'll do things like balance out the reds and the jaundice, but I do very little on actual skin fixing. So if I've got a baby who's coming with peely skin, I might soften it a tiny bit, but generally I leave it in. And what you do is you preempt it with the parents, a chat about your editing kind of levels, but also they'll buy what they see. So if on your website you make a feature of peely baby skin and show it as a positive, they'll take that as a positive. Equally, if it had a big flake or spot on the face, I would heal that out. But I do a very light retouch because I think if you get your lighting right, that does most of the work for you. Do I have a go-to website for newborn props and backdrops? Backdrops, have a look at Click Prop Backdrops. And in fact, if you drop me an email, my email is on the screen, ellie@elliecassidy.co.uk. I can give you a discount code for Click Props, okay? So have a look there. But their Pro Fabric ones are the ones that I use all the time in the studio, and the colours and everything photograph amazingly. If I use teddy bears or toys, does that detract from the shoot? If you pick the right one, no, it complements. But anything you put in an image, whether it's a prop or a soft toy, it should enhance the image and not be a distraction. Sometimes parents will bring a teddy in that is like really modern, like a very man-made fabric. So what I do then is take a picture with that toy in for the family, but then you take a picture with a lovely soft knit or kind of needle felt teddy that matches your style and your body of work. And that's the one I would put online because it's got to look coherent and not have this lovely traditional looking scene with a really bright toy in it, okay? And I think that's all the questions, but if you have anything I haven't answered, if I've missed anything, do drop me a line, get in touch. I'm really friendly. I like to chat. I'm on Insta and Facebook and email. Just say hello, and hopefully I can answer anything that you've got there that I've maybe missed or you've not thought of yet. Thank you so many of you for joining me. I hope it helps. Basically, don't be afraid of giving it a try. Start simple, find your style, and then invest. But don't go nuts spending money on thousands of props initially. Lots of us have been there. It's a very expensive mistake to make. So pick nice stuff and add to it when you've got a style established and when you're making money. So super.